If you've watched any of our other videos, you're likely to have heard us banging on about the fact your employer should have done a COVID-19 risk assessment in consultation with the workforce. And in this video, we just wanted to explain a wee bit more about what that means. So the risks you face at work will depend on many factors: the nature of your work, where it's done, who it's done with. And risk assessment is the way that your employer identifies hazards, so the things that might cause you harm while you're at work. They then need to consider how likely it is that those hazards might cause you harm, so what the risk might be. And they then need to go on and decide what can be done to either eliminate the hazards or else otherwise control the risk. Now, when considering what to do to control the risk, something called the hierarchy of control measures needs to be applied. The most effective ways of reducing the risk and protecting you from the hazard are at the widest part of this upside down triangle, and are what your employer should consider first before then moving down to the next stage. So if we work through this for the hazard of exposure to COVID-19, well, elimination is the first thing your employer should be considering. Preventing you, the workforce, from having to attend the workplace, either by putting in place work from home arrangements or else by placing workers on furlough. Substitution is the next level in the hierarchy, which would mean your employer considering alternative means of carrying out the work, online meetings or training, for example, or other means of avoiding in-person meetings. And alternatively, I'm only saying this because spring has maybe nearly sprung, is it possible to switch work outside where the risk of exposure is lessened? Now, the next most effective way of limiting exposure to the hazards are engineering controls, by which we mean things like physical barriers made of clear acrylic like perspex or plexiglass. This level could also include sensor controls for taps, bin lids, doors, etc., so that touch points are reduced. Means of disinfection of premises, for example by fogging, misting or UV treatment, could also be considered here. And to reiterate, that's of premises, not of people. We do not want people being put through some sort of disinfectant misting tunnel. And a key area under this heading is ventilation. So much so we're dedicating a whole other video to it. So you'll find a link to that in the description. Then, once ideas have been exhausted under those headings, administrative controls need to be considered next. This is really where the, hands, face, space mantra begins to come into play, because this is where physical distancing fits in, along with the signage and the markers to help guide people on maintaining physical distancing. It's where consideration should be given to staggering shift start and finish times, or limiting the occupancy of rooms or areas. It's also at this level that consideration is being given to cleaning regimes. How are high touch points going to be kept sterile? How are potentially contaminated cleaning cloths, etc., to be disposed of? And what are the hand washing, sterilising options, and how often is this to be carried out? There may also be other measures considered at this level. So examples might be, symptom screening checklists for workers and visitors, or designating a workspace or work equipment to a particular employee, or else setting out how it's going to be sterilised between use by different employees. And whatever the package of measures are that your employer is going to be putting in place, there needs to be means of communicating the new rules and practices, including where face coverings need to be worn, training on the new rules and practices, maybe changes being needed to inductions. All of that should again be considered here. Finally, we have personal protective equipment, PPE. This is the last thing your employer should be considering in the hierarchy. If this has been considered first, then they've considered this triangle the wrong way round. That's because PPE is aimed at protecting one individual. The Other control measures are aimed at protecting a wide range of individuals. At their most effective, they can protect everyone in the workplace. So PPE, it's really a last line of defence. And you know, PPE in a COVID context is most likely to be relevant to the likes of healthcare workers or care workers more general, for pupil support assistants in school maybe when undertaking certain tasks. PPE for these types of workers is going to include things like fluid-resistant surgical masks, full face shields, eye protection, gloves, an apron or a long-sleeved fluid-repellent gown. It's important to note that face coverings, they're not PPE. They don't protect you from being infected by coronavirus. They help other people from being infected by you if you have coronavirus. What we'll do is we'll put a link in the description to the HSE's guidance on COVID risk assessment, but we know it's a lot to digest. So if you want a wee, sense check on your employer's risk assessment, give us a call or drop us an email and our experienced advisors will be able to assist. Because why is it so important your employer gets this right? Well, the risk assessment is the foundation on which safe working practices are built. If the risk assessment is not what's termed suitable and sufficient, then it's more likely exposure to COVID-19 will occur, that you and your colleagues will become infected and will then take it home to your families. And nobody wants that. If you need free and confidential advice and support, you'll get us on 0800 0015 022 or by email to info@scottishhazards.org. Together, let's help stop this pandemic at work.